much older then, I'm younger than that now.
This is Growing Bolder, and I'm Bill Schaefer, and if there's one thing we have in common, it's gotta be stuff, right? We all love stuff. We collect stuff, we find places to stash it, and then we go out and we get some more. If we're unlucky, we end up on that show Hoarders and have to have someone like Matt Paxton help talk us off the ledge. And if we're lucky, we end up on that show Legacy List and have someone like Matt Paxton help tell the story of why we're so attached to it. But here's the point. We know we got to get rid of a lot of it. So how do we do it? How do we declutter? Now we can ask Matt Paxton himself. Yeah, we are joined by the King of Clean, the Duke of Declutter, the Sultan of Empty Space, and the hunk of junk to show us the road to lighten our load. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm great now. What an introduction. I feel like I'm supposed to wrestle or something now. That's amazing.
Well, let's hope you win 2 out of 3 falls,
Yes.
because your book, Keep the Memories, Lose the Stuff, it should be required reading for life, because we all have too much of it. We say we're going to get rid of it, and it probably, for most of us, doesn't happen till we're gone, and our kids end up having to do it.
Yeah, I spent the last 20 years helping the kids do it. And, 25 years really. But the last 10 years, I've noticed that mom and dad are like, no, we're going to take in charge of this, and we're going to do it on our terms.
And part of that is the exposure that you've given the whole concept.
Yeah, I mean, you really did a good job kind of summarizing my career. You know, I got into this because my dad, my stepdad, and both my grandfathers all passed away. And they all passed 1 year. And I had to clean out 4 houses. And that was really daunting and overwhelming. And the story is, my grandfather he said, hey, if something sucks as a job, you should do it as a job, because people will pay you to do it.
Now, wait a minute. That's fantastic. Yeah. It
was great advice.
That may be the best advice ever. So say your grandfather told you that. My grandfather,
he said, if something sucks, do it as a job, because it sucks for everybody else and they'll pay you to do it. And he was totally right. And I'm 25 years later, I'm still doing it. I mean, it's crazy. And he was totally right, because I was lost physically and emotionally. I didn't know what to do. I was cleaning out the 4 men that raised me. I was cleaning out their houses. So I was going through their stuff, reliving our entire past and our life and our joys and our happiness. And I missed them. And so there was just no book on like how to do it, how to tackle it. And so it took me 20 years to write the book.
You know,
I had a little bit of experience. Yeah.
From 30,000 feet, I mean, I'm sure there's people think, we all think that it's easy and it's fun, but it's not. I mean, it can be depressing and it can be sad, and you went through that yourself.
It can. All of those things are true. It can be sad and depressing and exciting and liberating all in the same journey, but it's a start and a finish, and it's a long journey, and it might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 years, it might be 20 years. But that's one of my missions now, is to really prove that it can be an amazing opportunity for your family to share the stories and share your legacy and really explore who you are, you know, as a people. And I'm getting a bit preachy here, but like I've been doing this long enough where I really have been able to find the positive in the stuff that we have. And so I really push that. I push the positive of it.
All right, look, I mentioned how important the book is, how we all need it. So let's talk about a few things that we can learn from the book, because another big point here, decluttering is not for amateurs. You've got to know what you're doing, or the traps will get you every time. It's hard.
Yeah, so I compare decluttering to weight loss, right? And it's the 2 easiest things to quit. Like with weight loss, you just eat some Cheez-Its, right? And it's over, right? Or with decluttering, you just shut the guest room door. And so you can really quit. So for a lot of these tips, it's to trick you into not quitting, because your brain will try to make you quit because it's frustrating and it's hard. But our brains can justify quitting anything. And so a lot of these tricks are to help you just to keep going. Because once you keep going, you're going to experience those positive vibes. And then that's what's going to keep you continuing to go.
Well, here's where we pull Matt Paxton out of the decluttering element and put you up as a world-renowned life coach, because your tips that you describe for how to declutter are the exact same things that any 18-year-old heading out to the world in life or any person who's 65 or heading towards retirement and wants to reinvent themselves needs to understand, because you can't just paint with a broad brush and no goal. Your first tip, maybe your most important tip, is to pick a finish line. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, believe it or not, so many of us get going and we're like, oh, I want to be the best. I'm going to be the best. Great. Like, what's define that for me? What is the best, right? And so in the decluttering purpose, people call me to say, I'm ready to downsize. I go, great, where are you moving to? And they go, well, I don't know yet. And what I found is that decluttering is really a way for your brain to avoid picking that decision of where you're going to go. Because deciding where if you live in a house that you've been in for 50 years, it's really hard to leave it. And so you don't want to decide where you're going. It's a lot like going to college. At least it was back when we went to college. And it was really hard because you didn't want to leave your family. You didn't want to leave your friends. And the same thing at 65 or 75 when we're time to move on. And so I make people say, great, when you tell me where you're going, then I'll help you downsize. And they get really flustered. And for me, the finish line is important. One, just to know, it's kind of like packing for a vacation. You're not going to pack if you don't know if you're going to the mountains or the beach, right? You got to know where you're going to pack. And so some of that's just very basic, like, do I take my couch? Do I take my bed? Do I have space for it? But what it's really about is the why, right? And the why, and this is where the life coaching comes in. I think you're right here. Why am I moving? And so why I want you to write down where you're going, and then I want you to I want you to put on a piece of paper, put it on your wall, your why. And what why is basically, am I moving to be closer to my adult children? Or am I moving for better health care? Or am I moving for a better life? Am I moving for a woman? Like, what am I moving for? They're all good answers, but I want you to be clear on what your why is, because your why is what will keep you from quitting. I use this example all the time. I have 7 kids, by the way, which usually throws people. The guy from Hoarders is hoarding kids is always the joke. And I have one of my dad died when he was 52, and I was really young. And my 12-year-old son the other day asked me, or 13-year-old son now, he said, hey, are you going to die at the same age that your dad did? And I said, what do you mean, man? And he goes, well, your dad was 52. Dad, I was doing the math. You're 47. If you die in 5 years, I'll still be in high school. And I said, he goes, I want you to still be here, Dad. I go, yeah, I'm going to be here. Like, do you think about that? He goes, I think about it all the time, Dad. I go, buddy, I'm definitely going to be there. And he goes, well, then why do you eat all that really bad food that you know is bad for you? And I thought, geez, that's not good, right? Like, he knows it's bad. He knows I'm choosing to eat it. And so he challenged me that day. He said, I want you to be a grandpa, Dad. And so that's my why. My why is I want to be a grandpa. I want to be around, because my kids don't have grandpas. All their grandfathers passed away. And so my why is grandpa. So every time I find something that's hard, I'm working out, or I want to eat something that's going to not be healthy for me, I think grandpa. So I want you to have your why when you're downsizing. What's your why? Is it health care? Is it better fitness? Is it just getting closer to your grandkids? Whatever it is, write that why down, and that'll keep you from quitting when it gets really hard.
We talk about that all the time in Growing Bolder in terms of people dealing with this new life stage that they find themselves in. You've got to have a purpose. You've got to understand why you're doing what you're doing. It goes right through this list that you're talking about. Having a purpose with cleaning up your house isn't just getting rid of stuff. It's knowing why you're keeping what you're keeping. And that leads to something, again, that I think fits in the life coach thing as well. You recommend that we all create a legacy list.
So legacy list I love it. It's obviously the name of my TV show on PBS. It's called Legacy List with Matt Paxton. But what a legacy list actually is it's a list of the top 5 or 6 items that matter most in your house. And they tell your family story. They're rarely financially valuable. They're most often emotionally valuable. I had one lady that we had a flag, right, in her attic. And this lady was 80 something. And we get into the trunk, we open the trunk, it's old steamer trunk, and it's a 44-star flag. And my brain immediately like, well, what are the other 6 states, right? And I can only get 4. And we're trying to figure it out. And we're like, how'd you get this? And she goes, oh, I don't know. It's just my grandfather's. But it means a lot to me that my grandfather did something to have a 44-star flag. And we start doing the research for it, and we found out that her grandfather indeed drove a train the day that Utah became a state in 1889. And they made a couple of those flags, and they put one on the side of his train, and end of his shift, he took it off and put it in a trunk, and we found it 120 years later, right? For her, the legacy was that he was this hardworking guy that helped deliver all these amazing politicians the day Utah became a state, right? it doesn't always have to be that grandiose. It can be anything. For me, it's a cookbook. I have my dad's ring and I have a cookbook that my mom made me, but that tells my family story. And so I want you to have 5 items. I start small because, believe it or not, those items, if you make 100 of them, well, then they're not special. But what happens is and I think when you do this is more important than what you do. When you create this list at the beginning of the process, it really helps you create 5 or 6 stories that you're then going to go tell your family. And it's going to be about your grandfather or your dad or your grandma, someone that helped you become who you are. And what happens is when you celebrate those stories so often, so early in the process by creating the legacy list, when you get to their Folgers can of nails in the garage, you don't have it's not as hard to let go because you've already celebrated the person and what they did for your family.
That's a great story. Part of the problem that I personally have, and I know everybody you talk to, we all have this issue. I'll hear a story like that, and I'll think, well, I might have had that 44-star flag. That week, it wasn't worth anything. That month, it wasn't. It took 50 years down the road before Matt came in and said, wow, what's this?
So if I hold on to this 50-star flag, it's going to be worth something someday,
I'm not letting go of anything. Ticket stubs, old watches.
Okay.
I'm not getting rid of anything because one day I'm going to be on Antiques Roadshow and looking good.
So here's a quick piece of advice on that. And basically, if you've seen it before, if you've ever seen it in anyone else's house or online or anything, it's probably not that valuable financially. Okay. But I really want to back up and I'm so glad you led with this because so many of us get hooked in the financial value. Okay. But you don't hold on to things usually because it's financially valuable. You hold on to things because it's emotionally valuable. And if I have to take a punchline from my 16 years on that show, Hoarders, I mean, I cleaned thousands of hoarded houses. And at the end of the day, believe it or not, the punchline is it's never about the stuff, right? People, they hold all that stuff, but it's not because of the stuff. They hold on to the stuff because of the people they loved and what happened to them, traumatically and what bad happened. The stuff made us feel better. So I took all of that advice to then explore the downsizing side. Why do we hold on to things? Same answer. We hold on to things because we love the people that were before us and the things remind us of them. So what I'm really going to push here is when you decide to move, when you decide to downsize, for the most part, you've already decided you didn't want the item, but then you entertain selling it. And once you entertain selling it, you now think, oh, all right, well, I'm not going to give this away. Now I'm not going to sell it for $400 because my grandfather paid $5,000 for it in 1884. And by the way, the math in the story never adds up, right? But we start to create a way to justify not getting rid of the item because of a financial reason. And that's hooey. That's not real. You just don't want to let go of stuff because you miss the person that passed away, right? So I want to keep coming back to you've already decided to get rid of the item. Don't let a financial discussion take you off course.
Here's another way that you propose, I think, is brilliant, that helps the rubber meet the road as far as what you save and what you don't. It's your concept of upsizing.
Yeah, I love upsizing. Look, I'm all about donation. I'm Goodwill's national ambassador, so I'm a little biased on that. But I don't care who you give it to. I want you to give it away to someone or some organization that you are aligned with their mission. Now, upsizing is a little different. Upsizing is a really cool way to do it. Upsizing is to use that item for something new, right? Like China is a great example. Not many people, not of the younger generation under 40, they don't want grandma's China anymore. And growing up, man, I was the last group that actually got China, right, at the wedding. And by the way, when I got divorced, it was still in the boxes, and both of us were trying to give the other one to have it because we didn't want it. We didn't need it, right? And so I've seen a lot of groups upcycle the China. They break it, and then they give it to a kid's, believe it, they break the China, they smash it all up, and then they give it to a kid's art group. And then that art group uses it to make mosaic pottery and dishes. And this sounds crazy, but think about it. Your stuff that no one else in your family wants is now being used for kids that don't have the means to create art. And then that art gets sold or given away. It has a new life. So it's an item you didn't want. And now, at no cost to anybody, it's being reused and repurposed for good. And to me, that's positive all around. And so I try to encourage people to do new ways to upcycle items to really bring joy to the whole process.
It's great. That's brilliant. I think from my own experience too, and I'm sure people will relate to this. And it's not that we collect stuff necessarily, but these are little things in your life that you happen to throw in a drawer for whatever reason. And we're all guilty of this. We don't live our own lives. Every single day, all I think about is what's my to-do list for tomorrow at work? What do I need to do to make sure that work gets done? And the next thing you know, the kids are grown, they're moving out, you're hitting a certain age and you're thinking of maybe I don't need the big house anymore. And the next thing you know, there are all these little pieces of you that are left in these drawers you haven't looked in since the last time you put that item there.
They're in a drawer for a reason because you don't have time to use them. The one I love is the box. It's in the back of the closet or the back of the attic. When I'm moving somebody, I find it. I go, "What's in that box?" And they go, "Oh, I don't know. I never unpacked it from the last time I moved here." And I go,
Yeah.
"Oh, how long you lived here?" "Oh, 20 years." I go, "Well, so can we donate it?" "Well, I don't know. I might need it." I'm like, "Well, we didn't use it for 20 years. I don't think we're gonna need it now." I love what you just said. I mean, and so let's get even deeper there, right? And this gets really emotional. Are all these little items proof that we existed, right? Are all these little items little reminders to the world that we have value, that we have self-worth? And I'm getting real deep here, but that's why we keep it, right? I'm going to argue your actions is what people remember, not your stuff. And I'm going to argue that 1,000 times over. I've been to a lot of funerals, and I've never been to a funeral where it's a show and tell. Someone holds up an item and they're like, "Yeah, I love my grandma, but man, this hat is so much. I'm glad she's dead. I got this hat," right? I'm being ridiculous, but that's the point. People remember how you treated them, what you did in your life. They don't remember the stuff. And so, I mean, I wish it was that easy, but it's a fact. And so these items, I mean, I went through, and the book channels this. I mean, I went through, while I was writing this book, the first half of the book I wrote, and then I fell in love with this woman, and now I had to move. And so I had written the book and had a lot of great tips, but it didn't have any emotion. And so I realized the book sucked because I was having a hard time moving. I'd fall in love with this woman. We were going to create a big family, but she was a minimalist, and I was really struggling with minimalism because I was going to have to get rid of about 75% of my stuff.
I have to argue with your wife on this because there's no way that you don't deserve another pair of Air Jordans, and that's just wrong.
You got them on right now.
Yep.
So here's the deal.
Matt's right. Tell him about that. Your wife said you cannot get a new pair unless you get rid of an old pair.
So we have space. Every kid, I have 7 kids. We live in a 2,600 square foot home, 9 of us. And every kid has including me, we have a 4-foot locker. And she's like, "You can keep whatever you want in the locker. But if it goes outside of the locker, it's open game. We can all downsize it." And it's funny, like I've given tips my entire life, but what marrying this minimalist did for me, by the way, happily married, it forced me to put action behind my words. And at the end of the day, did I want a bigger family that focused on doing things and instead of buying things, experiences? And I will tell you I have young kids. I mean, I go from 9 all the way to 16. I have 6 boys, 9 to 14. And it's really made parenting better because we're not sitting spending all of our time on stuff. We're spending our time on experiences and living life and teaching and coaching and living, and not just inventorying and storing and trying to get better jobs to pay for crap we don't need. I'm on the extreme side of it. I don't suggest it's for everyone, but I will say this: it did help me really find purpose in what I do, career and living. I got 5 shirts. I do have 10 pair of shoes. I'm not embarrassed about that. I love my Air Jordans. I wear them all the time. And what it's done is it's allowed me to get rid of stuff that didn't matter so that I can have the nice things that I want. And I encourage everybody to do that. Yeah.
You're right. We have something now that maybe in the past there's more of a reason to collect things, and we can put everything in this.
Everything.
Everything. I happen to love antique cars. I don't have 5 of them in the backyard. I like looking at them on websites.
So now you're talking about collecting the stories, right? And that's what I love. And I'm glad you brought it up. Like one of the best ways to clean your house out is to tell the stories. And my book and my TV show are heavy on that piece of advice. You've got to share your stories. You've got to get them out there. So you got to have someone that cares, that listens, right? Because it's frustrating to tell yourself. But sometimes you do have to you have to document it yourself. And so I say, look, worst case, you can do exactly. You can literally grab your phone and you can record the audio or record a video and you can show the item. There's a bunch of apps out there. I use an app called Artifacts, Artifcts. It's called. Great Artifact, great app. You can actually take a picture of the item. You can list it. You can tell the story. You can record audio. You can do everything, share it with anybody. I don't care how you record it, but just tell the story, because that's what lives on, is the story, not the item. We don't care about the plastic. We don't care about the aluminum. We don't care about the wood. We care about the stories and the emotions behind it. And so the more you tell those stories, believe it or not, and there's a bell curve here. At the beginning, the more you tell the stories, it's a little harder to let go. But when you really get used to telling the stories and you celebrate the past, you find yourself letting go of a lot more, and you donate a lot more versus selling, believe it or not, because you now just want that joy to go on to someone else that'll really appreciate it. But the more you tell these stories, the easier it actually gets to let go of the house. And then you still have all of the stories online. You can share them with anybody.
You're so right. It's the fear that these things, the meaning behind them, will get forgotten. It's not the thing itself. So whether you just take a picture and put the audio underneath it or whatever, just so it's saved, that's what it's all about.
It's the biggest fear that I'm going to be forgotten, right? And we want every little item we have to be a remembrance that we're here. And nobody remembers the little crap. They remember how you treated them. They remember the time you spent together. And I get really preachy here, but like, you just got to spend time with people, and you got to tell those stories, because they'll remember you telling the story. They won't remember what the item was.
You brought up another really everything you bring up is interesting, but I'm not going to keep you here forever. But we talked about donate when you can. But oh my gosh, some of the things that I go through, I'm like, I'd be embarrassed to take this to a donation center. Sometimes we go overboard with that, right?
We can, yeah. Remember, most of these donation centers are nonprofit. You don't want to pass on the cost of trash, right? I have a great quick story. There was a guy, Leroy, that used to work for me. He was an old homeless guy, lived in his car. He honestly preferred it. We used to try to put him in hotels, and he'd be like, nope, just give me the cash. I don't want to live there. And he was a funny guy. I mean, he was just a traveler around the world. He would work for you for like 6 months, and then he'd disappear. And he would just show back up 3 months later. And one day we were cleaning a lady's house, and she had an old shirt. It almost looked like a rag. It was torn apart. And she goes, well, I'll donate it. He said, ma'am, I'm homeless. I'm not ugly. I don't need your trash. He said, please donate your nice clothes. And we all burst out laughing. And she's like, you're totally right, Leroy. I'm sorry. And I've taken that story with me everywhere we go. Donate your best things, the things you don't need anymore, because that's going to make a difference more than the trash. If it's trash, throw it away or recycle it. I mean, depending where you live, if you can recycle. Sometimes recycling is harder than tossing it. But a lot of if you take it to 800 Got Junk or a College Hunks Hauling Junk or any of the junk places, they're going to do all that recycling for you, believe it or not. So you don't even have to worry about that.
It's great advice. And I wanted to ask you a question about your show too. So, you're on Hoarders, which is fascinating. The kind of show that people love these days, because every week you kind of take somebody who's emotionally fragile, and as delicately as possible, you kind of rip their hearts out, tear them down, tear down the walls, and then rebuild them. And it's great TV because we're on the edge where anything can happen. So then you come up with this great and meaningful idea for a show, Legacy List, which is positive, it's uplifting, features older people telling great life stories, and of course, no TV networks wanted it first.
Nobody. 37 networks turned us down. So yeah, and look, we're on Growing Bolder here, right? So I mean, you get it. So I went out there and I said, I had gotten A&E, their only Emmy nomination, and I was like, definitely I know A&E will want it. And 37 networks said no. One network asked if there were any attractive granddaughters that would fight over the stuff. And I laughed and I said, I'm sure there is, but that's not what the show I want to make. And at the end of the day, I was determined to make a positive show about aging Americans. And I'm going to tell you, as a storyteller, that's where the best stories are. Believe it or not. I mean, we're going to lose in the next 30 years, we're going to lose some of the most amazing stories that ever existed. If we don't get them down on paper, we're not ever going to hear them again. And so I was really determined to do that. And one buddy of mine said, hey, have you thought about public television? And I said, no. Is there any money in it? And he said, absolutely not. There's no money in public television, but you'll get to make the show you want to make. And he was right. And I'm happy to say we just got nominated for our second Emmy nomination for this show because it's a positive show. And I think we're at a time in the world where people need positivity more than ever. And I'd say watch that show. It's called Legacy List with Matt Paxton. You will want to call your mom afterwards. You're going to want to write your stories down. You're going to want to share those stories. And you're going to want to clean your house out. It's pretty awesome. Like positivity, once you give into positivity, it's like all you can do, right? It's the most addictive. Positivity is the most the best thing I've ever been addicted to. I'll tell you that. I've been addicted to a lot of things, and positivity is the best. And I just love doing it. And that's why I love this job. I tell everybody, if you're listening right now, you have a chance to go through your home and share your family history, share your family story for generations to come.
You do it from the heart, Matt. Though it didn't start out with a business plan. It started out because you put your heart out there.
I tried to be a millionaire on a lot of different businesses, and I failed every time. And when I gave in and just said, I'm going to help people, that's when I was able to be secure financially. And that's when life really just worked out. And so I kind of just focus on helping people. But I'm telling you, man, if you're sitting at home right now and you know you got to go through your house, you got to change your mindset. The mindset's not going to be, oh God, this is going to suck. The mindset is, okay, this is an opportunity to share some really good stories. And you're going to start small, like start with one story, one item. You can do it, but I promise you, if you change your mindset, it does get better and it actually becomes a joy. And you'll be disappointed when it's over. And people think I'm crazy when I say that, but I promise you, it'll be one of the better things you've done with your life if you go into it with the right mindset.
It's very inspiring, and it's something we all need to do. How about you, Matt? You're closing in on that 50 mark, the half century mark, where you'll be flipping past it soon. How are you different now than you used to be? I mean, how do you face what's coming? How are you excited about it?
Yeah. Oh my God, I love it. I mean, I've failed enough that I know life's going to be okay, and so now I can take bigger swings. But I'm a dad. I mean, I'm a dad first. That's my whole life, and I love it. I love being a partner to my wife. But I was kind of a jerk, and for a long time, I really was. I mean, I was a jerk in my 20s and my 30s. I was very selfish, and now I kind of can't wait. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but I have enough maturity and experience to know something cool's going to happen. I just don't know when, and it's not my call when. Life will tell me when. And so I'm just kind of hanging on for the ride. Let's see what happens. And if all I get to do is help a lot of people between now and whenever something cool happens, then it's still a pretty good life. And I get to eat ice cream on Fridays. So life is good. I'm finally getting healthy at a late point in my life. I'm now really enjoying getting healthy. But I love ice cream. I can't stress that enough. If anybody ever sees me, don't buy me a beer, buy me an ice cream. And I just find joy in everything now because I've met with so many of you, your viewers and your listeners, that I know there's some really incredible stories out there. And so that's what just keeps me going. And I just kind of gotta, instead of trying to create that story and try to be the hero, I've learned you just got to kind of chill and let the story come to you. And then you'll hear the story, and who cares who's the hero is. It's just the story. The journey is what's so awesome. So I love it. I got an amazing life, and I just want to see my kids grow old, I think like everybody else. And so I just try to create a place for that to happen.
It's great. There's so much in what you deliver that relates to so many of us, and it's hard to find things that we have in common these days. We're all about things that divide us, but you are right down the line on things that we all go through.
So we choose to talk about negative things, or we choose to talk about positive things. I'm telling you all, let's choose to talk about positive things. And that's what I did on TV. And look, I was on TV for 16 years. With Hoarders, and it's a hard 16 seasons, about 10 years, but it was a hard living. It was hard. It was overwhelming. And then now I made a really hard effort to push into positive entertainment. And I got to tell you, it's never been more enjoyable. And the first 2 seasons have been nominated for an Emmy. So people agree,
You're hitting the ball right in the sweet spot. So it's time for a takeaway now. What do you hope the moral of the story is, the lesson learned? What is the message that you want to leave us with?
Tell one story. Pick one item in your house. Tell a story to somebody in your family tonight. If you do that, I promise you. And if you don't have an item, tell them what your first job was and what you got paid. You're going to start a conversation.
And if you're looking for a purpose, remember, find what sucks and step right in because there's a need.
I think this whole retirement at 65 thing is ridiculous. I think most of my buddies that are retiring are bored to death. And I got a lot of them starting new businesses and helping people. And don't be afraid. You got knowledge that no one else in the world has at 75, at 85. There's a lot of people listening that are just sitting at home with knowledge that no one else has. Get out and share that knowledge, and you'll be amazed how exciting it is and how fun it is. And you'll help somebody, and you'll really dig it. It'll give you a purpose.
Lots of information, and just as important, lots of inspiration, because that very often is what it takes to get things done. This book's awesome. It's called Keep the Memories, Lose the Stuff. Even if you don't read it, which you will, at the back of the book here, there's a list of like the top 100 items Matt gets asked about the most. He lists them here, tells you what to do with them, how to get rid of them, etc., etc. So, all right, let's get our legacy list together and start on that as soon as possible. Great chat with Matt Paxton.